They failed. Not on the field, but in the eyes of history. Some of the most dominant Raiders to ever touch the gridiron are still locked out of Canton, forgotten, denied, disrespected. Lester Hayes picked off 13 passes in a single season, the most in the modern NFL era. He shut down legends, changed the game. But when Hall of Fame voting comes around, his name disappears again and again, and he's not alone. In this video, we begin with failure, rejected gold jackets, ignored legacies, and forgotten greatness. Then we go backward, tracing the stats, the glory, the controversy, and the reasons why these icons fell through the cracks. You'll learn the hidden stories behind Jim Plunkett, a two-time Super Bowl winning quarterback who never even made it to the finalist stage. Cliff Branch, a speed demon who outpaced Hall of Famers but had to die before they gave him a spot. And Lester Hayes, feared by offenses but blacklisted for stickum and silence. These aren't just football stories. They're cautionary tales of how bias, image, and politics rewrite history. So stick with us. By the end of this video, you'll understand why these men were left behind and why it matters more than ever. This is History of Raiders. Subscribe now and help us keep their legacies alive. They were stars, game changers, champions, and somehow they were denied the one honor that seemed inevitable, the Hall of Fame. Start with Lester Hayes. In 1980, he terrorized quarterbacks with 13 interceptions in a single season. That's still tied for second most in NFL history after the 1970 merger. He was named NFL Defensive Player of the Year. He earned 5 Pro Bowl selections, made the All-Pro team 5 times, and won 2 Super Bowl rings. On paper, he's a lock. But when the Hall of Fame committee meets, his name is never called. Then there's Cliff Branch, a wide receiver with Olympic-level speed. He led the league in receiving yards. He caught deep balls like it was nothing. He played 14 seasons for the Raiders, won 3 Super Bowls, and made 4 Pro Bowls. His numbers were right up there with Hall of Famers like Lynn Swann and John Stallworth. But unlike them, Cliff waited and waited. He died in 2019, still without a gold jacket. It wasn't until 2022, years after his death, that the Hall finally gave him a place. And Jim Plunkett, the man with one of the greatest comeback stories in NFL history, a Heisman Trophy winner, a former #1 draft pick. His career didn't start smoothly, but he turned it around with the Raiders. He led them to 2 Super Bowl victories. In 1980, he took them from the wild card to the championship. He wasn't flashy, but he was clutch when it mattered most. Yet despite his playoff heroics and MVP-caliber moments, he's never made it past the semi-finalist stage. 3 iconic Raiders, 3 cases of excellence, all left out. So why? What held them back? Was it politics? Personal bias? Media narratives? Or was it simply that they wore silver and black in an era when the NFL didn't like rebels? The facts are hard to ignore. Their resumes are rich, their legacies undeniable. And yet, the Hall of Fame door never opened. The fail isn't theirs. It belongs to the system that looked the other way. At their peak, these Raiders weren't just good, they were elite. They didn't just play the game, they changed it. Let's start with Cliff Branch. From 1974 to 1980, Branch caught fire. He racked up 6,047 receiving yards during that stretch. That number would have been even higher in today's pass-heavy league. He wasn't just fast, he was surgical. Branch could slice through zone coverage, leave defenders frozen, and pull away in the open field like few others have. He was named first-team All-Pro 3 times, a badge of pure dominance. When the Raiders needed a big play, the ball went to Branch. His deep threat ability forced defenses to play differently. Safeties couldn't cheat. Corners couldn't gamble. Cliff Branch changed how defenses planned their Sundays. Then there's Lester Hayes. In 1980, Hayes did the impossible. 13 interceptions in one season. That's tied for second most in NFL history after the 1970 merger. He was a shadow. He didn't just cover receivers, he erased them. Quarterbacks feared his side of the field. His footwork was unmatched. His reading of routes was almost psychic. And yes, he used stickum. But so did others. The truth is, stickum didn't make Lester Hayes great. His instincts did, his physicality, his raw fearlessness. In an era before the shut-down corner label became popular, Hayes already defined it. And then Jim Plunkett. Unlike the others, Plunkett didn't light up the stat sheets during the regular season, but when it counted most, he delivered. 2 Super Bowl wins, a Super Bowl MVP, and both championships came when he was considered washed up. A former #1 overall pick, discarded and doubted, who came back to lead the Raiders as an underdog. In 1980, after stepping in for an injured Dan Pastorini, Plunkett led the Raiders from wild card to Super Bowl glory, a first in league history. He did it again in 1983. Calm under pressure, he wasn't flashy, he was efficient, focused, deadly when it mattered most. Each of these players in their own way reshaped the NFL. Branch stretched the field, Hayes closed it. Plunkett owned it when it mattered most.
Yet despite all this, the Hall of Fame doors remain closed. The Hall of Fame isn't just built on stats. It's shaped by narratives, those the league accepts and those it resists. For decades, the Raiders have been the latter, a team forged in rebellion, built by outsiders, and led by men who didn't care for tradition. That defiance, while iconic to fans, has carried a cost. From the very beginning, the Raiders were labeled as outlaws. Al Davis wasn't just an owner, he was a challenge to the NFL's old guard. He clashed with commissioners, broke unspoken rules, and prioritized winning over image. While other franchises played politics, Davis played to win. He took in players others wouldn't touch. Troubled past? No problem. Misfits? Perfect. If you could play, you were in silver and black. That approach built champions, but it also painted the Raiders as troublemakers in the eyes of NFL elites. This perception hardened when the NFL absorbed the AFL. Many Raiders greats built their legacies in that older league, and while the merger supposedly unified pro football, it didn't erase bias. Some Hall of Fame voters from the pre-merger era, particularly the older ones, treated AFL stats and honors as less than. Players like Tom Flores, who coached 2 Super Bowl wins, or Ken Stabler, who redefined quarterbacking in the 70s, were forced to wait decades for enshrinement. Some never lived to see it. Even now, that division lingers. There's an unspoken standard, what a Hall of Famer is supposed to look like. On paper, Lester Hayes checks every box. So does Cliff Branch. So did Jack Tatum, Dave Grayson, and Raymond Chester. But they wore the wrong jersey. They didn't smile for cameras. They weren't polished spokesmen. They were pure football. Violent, fast, disruptive. And that's part of the problem. The Hall rewards more than just performance. It rewards narratives that fit the league's polished legacy. The Raiders, with their black uniforms, snarling defense, and outlaw culture, never fit that mold. And players who define that identity are often left out in the cold. That same edge that made them legends, it may be the very thing keeping them out. When you look at the stats, the impact, and the wins, these Raiders should have been locks for Canton. But football, like all great stories, is shaped not just by facts, but by perception. And in that space, character and controversy quietly do their damage. Take Lester Hayes. He was a nightmare for opposing quarterbacks. Quick, agile, instinctive. In 1980, he intercepted 13 passes in a single season, a record that still stands in the post-merger era. But when Hall of Fame voters talk about him, one word always surfaces: stickum. A gooey adhesive once legal in the league, stickum gave players a better grip. Hayes used it heavily and openly. So did many others, especially receivers like Fred Biletnikoff, a Hall of Famer. But unlike Biletnikoff, Hayes never quite escaped the label. Even after stickum was banned, he remained dominant, proving his skill was no fluke. Still, the stigma stuck harder than the substance itself. Then there's Cliff Branch. He burned defensive backs with world-class speed, torched secondaries in big games, and was a deep ball threat in an era when the deep ball was rare. But Branch was quiet. He didn't make headlines, didn't give colorful interviews, didn't seek attention. That worked against him. Voters remembered the voices, the loud personalities, the highlight reels accompanied by flair. Branch let his legs do the talking, and for some, that wasn't loud enough. He played in the shadows of Biletnikoff and other stars, even as he outran them. Jim Plunkett, the two-time Super Bowl-winning quarterback, carried a different kind of burden. Injuries plagued his early years. His body took punishment, his performances dipped. His career stat line looks uneven because it was. He never posted a dazzling regular season. But when the playoffs came, he turned ice cold under pressure, winning games that others couldn't. Still, his inconsistency and reputation as a comeback story labeled him more as a survivor than a legend. Voters focused on his valleys more than his peaks. All three men were victims of perception. Hayes, the rule bender; Branch, the silent burner; Plunkett, the battered warrior. In an era when media presence mattered, these Raiders didn't play the narrative game. They just played football. And somehow, that wasn't enough. Reputation lingers longer than results. And in the case of these Raiders, it shaped how they were remembered or forgotten. When it comes to the Hall of Fame, wearing silver and black seems to come with a price. Few teams in NFL history are as iconic or influential as the Raiders, yet the road to Canton has often been blocked for their stars. And the delay isn't subtle, it's decades long. Take Tim Brown, for instance. He was one of the most consistent receivers of his era. Over 1,000 catches, nearly 15,000 yards, more than 100 touchdowns. But despite those numbers, he waited 7 years before finally being inducted in 2015. Brown was a Heisman winner and the face of the Raiders' offense for years, but it didn't matter. Voters took their time. Then there's Ken Stabler, the Snake, a Super Bowl champion, league MVP, and one of the most electric quarterbacks of the 1970s. He led the Raiders to consistent success and was a major reason for the team's feared reputation. Yet Ken Stabler waited 25 years after his retirement. In fact, he wasn't inducted until after his death. He died in 2015. He was inducted in 2016. His bust arrived too late for him to see it.
Cliff Branch followed the same bitter path. One of the most explosive wide receivers of the 1970s and 80s, Branch helped the Raiders win 3 Super Bowls. He led the league in receiving yards, was a first-team All-Pro 3 times, and was a constant deep threat. But despite his numbers and rings, Branch was only inducted in 2022, over a decade after he passed away in 2019. Now compare Branch to other receivers of the same era, Lynn Swann and John Stallworth of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Swann had 336 catches and 5,462 yards. Stallworth had 537 catches for 7,823 yards. Branch? He finished with 501 catches and 8,685 yards, nearly identical to Stallworth and better than Swann. But Swann was inducted in 2001, Stallworth in 2002. No delay, no controversy. They had the rings, yes, but so did Branch. The difference? Not the numbers. It was the jersey. Fans have never stopped pointing this out. ESPN once ran a piece titled "Cliff Branch Embarrassed Mel Blount," referencing a game where Branch made one of the NFL's most feared cornerbacks look helpless. Mel Blount is in the hall. He got in smoothly. Branch? He had to wait until after his life was over. The Raiders have always had a certain image. Tough, rebellious, outside the system. That image worked on the field, but when it comes to Hall of Fame voters, it seems to hurt them. There's a belief among players, analysts, and fans that there's a long-standing bias against Raiders players. Even Al Davis, the team's legendary owner, once accused the NFL of holding grudges. And based on how long players like Brown, Stabler, and Branch had to wait, it's hard to argue with him. Analysts have echoed the frustration. Every year during the finalists' announcements, you'll find articles, blogs, and YouTube breakdowns asking the same thing. Where is Lester Hayes? Or why isn't Plunkett even considered? The public outcry is real. Fans have signed petitions, writers have campaigned, players have spoken out. And yet, names like Hayes remain off the list. Some players got in, but only after years of silence. Others like Branch and Stabler were honored only after death. And many, still, remain outside the gates of Canton, their gold jackets unworn, their stories ignored by the Hall. The comparison isn't just about numbers. It's about how some legends get celebrated, while others, just as worthy, are left to fade. Time has passed, but the shadows of these men still stretch across the Raiders' story. Start with Lester Hayes. His name still haunts the defensive stat books. 13 interceptions in a single season, a number no modern cornerback has matched, not one. That record still belongs to him and to the Raiders. Hayes wasn't just a ball hawk. He was a wall. He changed how corners lined up, how they jammed receivers, how they thought. He was physical, psychological, silent. Opponents feared his eyes more than his hands. The NFL named him to the 1980s All-Decade Team, a spot reserved for icons. And yet somehow he never got the call to Canton. Still waiting, still watching others with fewer accolades get bronze busts while his legacy waits outside the gate. Then there's Cliff Branch. Before speed became a brand, Branch made it a weapon. He stretched the field long before analytics cared about yards per route. Quarterbacks trusted him. Defenders couldn't track him. He could take the top of a defense without saying a word. 3 Super Bowl rings, 4 Pro Bowls, and for most of his career, he did it with silence and speed. Cliff wasn't a showman. He was a specialist, a technician. The guy defensive coordinators warned about in film rooms but couldn't stop on the field. Many modern receivers, especially the deep threats, owe something to Cliff Branch. His routes weren't flashy, but they were fatal. Today's NFL wideouts sprint in his footsteps, whether they know it or not. But Branch had to wait until after his death to be enshrined in the Hall of Fame. By the time he got in, his voice was gone. His smile was missing. The cheers came too late. Then comes Jim Plunkett, the quarterback without the polish, overlooked, underrated, beaten up, and yet victorious. Twice. He didn't have the cleanest mechanics, he didn't light up the regular season, but when the playoffs came, Plunkett transformed. Cold, unshaken, strategic, a commander. He led the Raiders to 2 Super Bowl wins, one as a wild card, one after injuries nearly ended his career. His story was made for movies, but never given one. Too quiet, too complicated. Plunkett wasn't a golden boy QB, he wasn't a media darling, he was a fighter. The kind that takes hits and gets back up. Every time. In a game of inches, he gave everything. Today, fans chant his name in bars and tailgates. They debate his exclusion every year. They share highlights and remind younger generations, that's the guy who won it twice. Yet no bust sits in Canton with his likeness. Just silence. These 3 men, Hayes, Branch, and Plunkett, built legacies in silver and black. Not with spotlight speeches or scripted careers, but with grit, pain, and undeniable impact. They shaped the Raiders' identity, tough, fearless, defiant. Their plays live on in old VHS tapes, YouTube reels, and in the memories of those who watched them grind through eras that offered no favors. The Hall may have passed them by, but the game never will.
The Hall of Fame is more than a museum. It's a mirror, a reflection of who we choose to celebrate and who we choose to forget. That's why these snubs hit so hard. When legendary Raiders like Lester Hayes or Jim Plunkett are kept out, it's not just a missed vote, it's a missing piece of the NFL's story. Lester Hayes wasn't just great, he was revolutionary. His 13 interceptions in 1980 stand as the most in a single season since the NFL-AFL merger. That year, he won Defensive Player of the Year, made first-team All-Pro, and helped carry the Raiders to a Super Bowl victory. But when you walk through the hall in Canton, his name is nowhere to be found. What does that say about how we define greatness? Cliff Branch broke defensive backs and playoff records alike.
His speed redefined the vertical game in the 1970s. He led the league in receiving yards, won 3 Super Bowls, and made defenses panic. Still, his enshrinement came only after his death. A tribute, not an honor. A late apology, not a celebration. Jim Plunkett is one of the most polarizing examples. The first Latino Heisman winner, the first Latino quarterback to win a Super Bowl, and he won 2. His career had early struggles, yes, but what about the late success, the leadership under fire, the comeback nobody saw coming? It all happened. But to the Hall, it somehow wasn't enough. That's what makes these omissions matter. It's not just about rings or stats, it's about the message. Because when a system consistently overlooks players who broke barriers, rewrote records, and shaped the game, fans start to question the criteria. Is it performance or personality? Is it achievement or allegiance? And that's the heart of the controversy. The Raiders have always been outsiders. Al Davis built a team that welcomed those no one else would touch. Black quarterbacks, loud voices, rule breakers, rough hitters, they all found a home in silver and black. That rebel image, so iconic on Sundays, became a scarlet letter when voters met behind closed doors. Fans haven't forgotten. Across forums, YouTube channels, and podcast debates, the fight continues. Raiders Nation chants for recognition. Analysts revisit the film. Writers dig through archives. And still, Hayes waits. Plunkett is overlooked. Others are ignored. This is bigger than football. It's about legacy, about who gets remembered and who gets rewritten. Because in the end, the Hall of Fame is not just a collection of busts, it's a storyteller. And right now, it's telling an incomplete tale. They failed at Canton, but not in history. Lester Hayes picked off more passes in one season than anyone in the modern era. He locked down legends and carried the Raiders to a Super Bowl title. But still, no gold jacket. Cliff Branch burned defenders with world-class speed, stacked up playoff records, and helped the Raiders win it all 3 times. His game changed how receivers played. Yet his bust came only after his death, a tribute, not an honor. A late apology, not a celebration. And Jim Plunkett, he was left for dead in the league. Then he rose again. 2 Super Bowl wins, one of the greatest comebacks in quarterback history. But somehow, his name keeps missing from the Hall of Fame ballot. These aren't just missed honors, they're wounds. Evidence that the game's greatest aren't always the ones remembered, that merit doesn't always win out, that legacy can be shaped not by performance, but by perception. So we ask you, if these men gave their all on the field, if they sacrificed, won, and left a mark on the sport we love, why are they still left out? The facts are here. The careers speak for themselves. The question now is, will anyone listen? If you believe these Raiders deserve their place in Canton, speak up. Share this video. Keep their names alive, because history doesn't forget those who refuse to be silent. Thank you for watching History of Raiders. If you found this story important, like this video and subscribe to our channel for more untold chapters from the Silver and Black. Their fight isn't over, and neither is ours.